John, we certainly want to talk to you about big tech. But, I'd love to start off on China, if I might, with you. You have a lot of experience there, of course, as CEO of Cisco, what you did for the company in that country. Given the increasing tensions between China and the U.S. and everything we're seeing, what advice would you give to a company that does a lot of business in China or relies on a supply chain from that country?
3 or 4 thoughts and a great question. Yeah, and I was with Wang Laboratories. Dr. An Wang was Jiang Zemin's prior president of China's classmate at their universities. Understand the market well. In China, during the time I was at Cisco in 1995, for the decade and a half after that, always created a win-win environment, tough negotiators, but usually pretty fair. It's developed into win-lose. So advice to my own startups, I'm steering clear of China for now. For companies that are doing business there, be aware of your intellectual property issues. It's such a temptation to say even a small slice of what will eventually become the largest economy in the world is so important. But you have to do it in a way that looks out for your interests long terms. I believe that eventually the U.S. and China will get it back together. However, I think it's probably going to get it a little bit rougher before it gets better. The intellectual property theft, the issues on security are increasing dramatically, as we've all seen out of the universities and seen with the most recent tit-for-tat movements in terms of embassies.
So your expectation is not a particularly good one at this point. As you said, you would advise your companies to steer clear. I mean, how long can you steer clear of what, as you just said, also will become the largest economy in the world at some point?
You have to make your decisions for the long term. Eventually, there'll be a win-win scenario here. I believe that we had to confront this with China and get it back to a win-win. The relationships will never be the same. But if I were modeling it, I'd say you'll see the evolution over the next year. It will be a new relationship when we come back, important to both sides. But I want to caution people, don't lose track of short-term benefits and long-term implications to your company.
John, David and Mike Santoli were talking about this earlier in the show, but kind of going back to this theme of the 5 largest tech stocks and their overall concentration in the S&P 500, they represent 22%. Those 5 stocks are up 35% this year, whereas the remaining 495 stocks are trading lower, down 5% for the year. So as we kind of look ahead to some of the antitrust discussions taking place, do you think that there's a potential risk for the overall S&P 500 index, even if investors aren't, heavily invested in tech, they are through this index? Do you think that those considerations should be made as lawmakers look to potentially break up big technology companies?
I'm a believer that if you look to the past, you get an idea of the future. I've watched over the years in terms of geographies that had the toughest antitrust movements, regulatory issues, et cetera, like Europe, never really developed large tech. China is clearly being very aggressive in this area per our earlier conversation on it. So you've got to be very careful of the unintended consequences. When you think about large tech, we at times say if you charge too much, you're price gouging. If you charge too little, it's predatory pricing. If you charge about in the middle, it's collusion. But often the unintended consequences here could be dramatic. You watch how Amazon has helped dramatically during the pandemic, distribute goods, et cetera. If you believe that the tech indexes will outperform traditional indexes by 2 to 1 over this next decade that I do, and you watch what's occurring in the market, we have the very unique position in this country to be the leader in tech with 5 major horses here. And to your point, a lot of Americans have done very well in terms of the stock. So I think it's important that the government look at the regulatory issues here in a normal sense, not just go in with an attitude that big tech is bad. And there's probably going to be a balance. Both the Democrats and Republicans send a message to Silicon Valley, to the very big tech companies here, saying if you don't adjust, if you don't work with us, we're going to be coming, and you probably won't like the outcome. So I think it's going to get a little bit bumpy there. Big tech is the best I've ever seen at organic growth, the best. Normally, as you get bigger, you slow down on your innovation, et cetera. The Big Five haven't done that at all. They've been tremendous on innovation. In terms of acquisitions, they've also done very well there. You might see some regulation, more careful looking at as they do the acquisitions. But if you watch what's happening and just watch with our leadership in semiconductors and recently with Intel, you begin to realize that we do need these big tech companies. There's a huge advantage in size and economic power, and there needs to be a balance between very legitimate needs of citizens and the government and these tech companies. Hopefully we'll work through that without doing dramatic damage to our economy.